Calls for the federal government to declare the United States a Christian nation continue to make headlines.
Christian nationalists understand themselves to be playing a character. They are drawn into a narrative.
This election year, apostolic Reformation Christian leaders are again mobilizing their churches. They want the Pied Piper of MAGA back in the White House. The current Speaker of the U.S. House is an associate. Germany in the 1930s comes to mind. This is 2024. Things are quite different, right?
We're in a very dangerous spot between now and next November, and it's scary to see how things seem to be trending.
Reverend John Matthews is a retired Lutheran pastor. He has notably written and spoken about the role of churches in Germany during the growth of the Nazi Party that led to World War II and the Holocaust. Mike McIntee is a seasoned and innovative electronic news executive and journalist. Let the discussion begin.
Religion and government. That's what we're talking tonight. John, thanks for joining me. I wanted to talk a little bit about, to start off with, what Christian nationalism is, because we've been talking before the camera came on here, and I wanted to get your take on what that is.
As we did talk about earlier, we have had revolutions in the last 50, 60 years, revolutions of gender identity and gender roles. We have a country now that's filled as never before with people from all different kinds of religions, and of course race has been a part of our history, for good and for bad, the interaction. But with all this change and all, it's created anxiety with people, and they tend to want to jump back. Many people jump back to a time when it seemed more secure, more innocent, more the time of Donna Reed and Leave It to Beaver, and Christian nationalism is a way to say that that is a word attached to sort of the way things should have been, could be now, and would make things a whole lot better. So when you combine religion with patriotism, though, that starts to complicate things, and usually it ends up, the ending is not good as people would hope it would be. So,
when you talk about nationalism, we're talking not so much that I have my religion, I'm going to live the life I want to live, but it's I have my morals and values, and I think I should impose them on other people. Is that where we start getting into where things kind of go off the tracks?
It seems like that, because especially with immigration, and the more that these other religions, other peoples from other places have come in, the degree to which people don't understand those, they simply hear stereotypes about them, that begins to create the fear. Then you hearken back to what would be that which is most reliable, and we've at least known 200 plus years where we think Christianity had a pretty powerful role. Now that things seem to be disintegrating or falling apart, you can start to look for the places where that might show up, and that's where it starts to surface out of those unknowns.
You talk about others, and people have fear when they don't really know somebody, and that's where the problem grows. But it seems like where we are these days, we should be able to know each other much better. We've got social media, we've got all sorts of communications going on. Why do we see still that this othering thing is going on and that people are fearful of others?
Yeah, we find this, in the churches that I have been a part of too, we find that surfacing. We could say we should know more because of media, but as you know, you can choose your media. And if you choose certain venues, they almost demonize the others. And if that's your constant diet of those kind of sources, what we tried to do in the churches that I've been a part of, but also in the Minnesota Multi-Faith Network, in terms of teaching and helping people understand, is to actually create one-to-one contacts and relationships. In our Lutheran church in Apple Valley, the year before I retired, we would have several of these, a lot of these, but where we'd bring together a Muslim imam and a Jewish rabbi, and then maybe one of us as a Christian, or bring in Hindus or Baha'i or something else, and have a dialogue or a trialogue. And amazingly, the 40 or 50 or 80 people that would show up for that, they would get to know somebody one of those others, and to talk to them after, they're different people. So sometimes I think only through relationships and getting together, studying about it helps, but getting to know somebody really is where that starts, where they get to know, and then you're right, then the fear is broken, then it's sort of dismantled.
I mean, it's not just religion. I mean, I did some work covering the marriage equality movement here in Minnesota. The strongest things that they said they could do, they being the group that was trying to push marriage equality and try to defeat the amendment that was going to make it illegal, they would have long conversations with people and get to know them. And then if you found out that you knew somebody in your life who was gay or lesbian, that this would change your opinion about whether or not, I mean, you may not totally get it, but you would really not want to impose your life, your religion, or whatever on somebody because of that.
It moves it from just being kind of a social issue to actually a relational possibility, and that's, I think you could say the same for abortion or other issues that are, they remain issues as long as you don't have to personally deal with it, and as soon as your daughter or your niece or somebody has to deal with that, it now has a whole different feel to it. So I think that's true, and in the Christian nationalism thing, I think one of the things I would like to be able to talk about, but I'm no longer in the pulpit, so I don't have that venue.
You got the pulpit here.
Well, we got it right here.
Yep.
But a part of that is to help people understand. For instance, in the church that I was at, the last church, there got to be this issue about whether we should bring the American flag, which was kind of by the entrance to the church, up to the front of the church. And we had those discussions, and we did them in constructive ways, I think, because there were, I happen to be a veteran, but there also were some pretty patriotic veterans who were on the charge from the other side. And the reason that was a case of Christian nationalism kind of right there in front of us on that one issue was they wanted the flag up front, and I prevailed after several good discussions to say that we have the cross up front. That's the focal point of our orientation in this space. And the American flag is where it is so that it's within our space, but it clearly is not front and center. But interestingly, one of the parishioners who wanted to argue differently said, so we'll take the flag out of the church this week, and then next week we'll take the Bible out. And it's like, how did you get there?
That's a long journey.
That's a jump, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it goes to show you how when church and state, or in this case Christianity with a flag, we have a Christian flag too, it shows you how those get welded so closely and powerfully that a step for us was, it was a success to keep the flag by the entrance and the cross up front. Because I knew from past experience that that goes up there, and the next thing we have is a veteran service, which is fine. I am one. But the next thing is to keep talking about how America's right, no matter what. It evolves into this Christian nationalism thing, sort of gets magnified, but that was just one example where the flag in the church, I could have lost that battle, depending on things.
Well, you're talking literally there, separation of church and state. You know, in the same room, we got to keep these things separate, or at least at a distance. And you know, we were talking about history before we started talking here today, and you've been a student of history. You've seen, as I indicated earlier, where these things can go off the rails. Tell me why keeping those two forces apart, at least as far as they should be, important, and what happens when it doesn't.
This has been raised now. The individual that I've spent most time theologically working with was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran pastor theologian, martyred in the spring of '45 for his complicity in the plot to kill Hitler. That's why. That's why he was killed.
Let's state it.
Well,
explicitly, he was killed.
Hanged at Flossenburg.
Yes.
Yep. And that drove me to looking into that time in history, but also the Holocaust. But what today, when that's brought up, some kind of parallel to Nazism, you know, people will say, well, I think that's an overreaction, and it's certainly not what's happening today and all that. Today isn't 1944 Germany. we don't have concentration camps per se, and we haven't had an enabling act which gives our president the power to do anything that's necessary, like Hitler was granted in 33. But it may be more accurate to say that we have times that resemble 31 or 32.
Tell us what that was like.
Well, and this was the pre-Nazi times, but during the Weimar Republic, things were not going well. The economy was in the toilet. Inflation was at its worst. Post-World War I shame. A variety of factors, economically, politically, religiously, that mount up to setting the stage for Germany needing a powerful strongman leader. So the factors which start to look funny or are suspicious for Americans now, which it's mainly the historians, I suppose, that get most nervous about the times we're experiencing now. Because when you talk about controlling which books can be read, you want to control the curriculum in school. The leader in particular wants to be able to deal with the judiciary in a way that's compatible for him. Those things are the signs which they had in pre-Nazi Germany, but they were experiencing, but no one took with particular alarm. Further, when the strong man was appointed chancellor in January of 1933, although he had kind of strong language about things, most of the people interestingly said, well, this is just what he needs to get things in order, and once things are in order, then that will be pulled back, so you won't need that. Those are we could talk for a long time just on the things that sort of lined up so that when a leader was put in place who would be a strong person and would return Germany to its former days of glory, there's so many signs like that that you can't help but make those parallels now. I mean, today from Nazi Germany to here, but some people say it's overreacting or it's being too alarmist.
I'll play devil's advocate here with a pastor and say, we're not Nazi Germany. That's not going to happen. That's too far, that's too far down the road. I'm sure we've got Congress, we've got a Supreme Court, we've got all these institutions that are going to protect us. We don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
Germany was the last place on the earth that anyone would have expected to have happened what happened between 33 and 1945. This is the center of intellectual everything. This is a place of the most sophisticated, erudite elite. These are people, all of the positive and good things could be said. And if someone would say, if that's precisely why I think it caught them short in 33, 34, 35, how this can be happening because of who Germany was. So, yeah, if you look at, of course, and the other thing we mentioned earlier too is history will not repeat itself exactly. It won't have the same shape. But the danger signs are what one wise person said were kind of an early warning sign.
I think it was Mark Twain says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
And the rhymes are what we pick up on.
Yes.
And so when the scholars of history and Holocaust will tell you to be careful because look what's happening, we sit up and we take notice. I think it's the people who more maybe don't want to think that that we're at risk or this could happen that just kind of downplay that. But no, we're in a very, my opinion, we're in a very dangerous spot between now and next November. And it's scary to see how things seem to be trending.
Phrase I hear often is silence is complicity.
Yeah. It's true, and there's another thing that can be dated too. In 1933-34, there were lots of pastors who preached against the National Socialist experiment, government, and they were simply put in prison. By 35 or 36, they didn't even take that risk because it just meant they'll be dismissed, they'll be imprisoned or killed. So timing is everything too, because silence, which in the beginning is kind of like, well, it's not as bad as it seems. We're here to say that by 1936 and 37 in Germany, then it didn't matter, you were not going to turn this tide. So in those earliest years is when not being silent is so important, which I think is probably where we're at.
I mean,
know.
The elephant room here, let's talk about it for a moment, is literally the Republican Party, where we have a lot of this has found its way into. And right now, the penalty about being vocal on that is being ostracized by the de facto leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, which at the moment means you're going to get some nasty things said about you on Truth Social, or maybe Twitter if he's still on there, I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is that's where we can stop things as opposed to what might happen next.
It's amazing the power, and when we say, in looking back at those Nazi times, if we're not careful, we can be sort of self-righteously critical, like, if that stuff begins to happen, well, I know I would speak up. You look at the Republican Party right now, not all, but majority, super majority of it, where some of us would be trying to figure out, why has that man got that kind of grip on that party? I mean, part of it's mysterious. Like, I mean, I really don't know. You could say, well, they're afraid that he could bring stuff up that could destroy it. But where we're back to integrity is, I know, but isn't truth and integrity more important to you than simply staying on the good side of someone who is speaking such evil? Good question.
Yeah. Where are we going to look to for the courage to deal with this? I mean, right now it sounds like we're talking about a lot of cowardice. Whether we're talking about, you know, what's the parallel? If we're doing parallels here, who had the courage in, you know, Germany to speak up and change things, and did it make a difference?
To repeat that date back then, after 36, it didn't matter. The problem in the early part, and this is one of my own areas of interest and sort of specialty, is those who were not able in 1933, 1934, to see that the marriage of National Socialism with the history of Germany and with the Christian foundation, we say they were not able. One needs to keep in mind all of the factors that led into that Hitler phenomenon. And it's complex, and part of what we would teach in schools is how complex it is, and not to simplify it like, well, one or two things and that's what made a difference. It was very complex. And so when we get back to at what point it would have made a difference, back then, given the 8 or 10 major things that were falling apart, we may say, I'm not sure anything would have, except we don't have the same degree of unemployment and starvation. America does not have a crappy self-image, unless you want to go there and just say, well, look what happened in Afghanistan. I mean, but this is nothing like post-World War I. Mm-hmm. So the major factors that were in place aren't even there. So we're really only dealing with 2 or 3 factors. And it might be this kind of incipient, or I don't know what word's perfect here, but this anti-government, anti-science,
anti-intellectualism,
all that.
Yep.
The degree to which that has taken hold, now you're pulling people onto that Trump phenomenon, whether they're in the Republican Party or not. You're pulling them onto that for reasons that I think they're not even aware of how dangerous that is. So yeah, that would be part of it. But well, how do you see that when you say, I would ask you that question too, the Republican, what accounts for the fact that people, many have seemed to lose their rational sense of balancing all these things and just get tied into a strong man who speaks big, doesn't accomplish too much, but is filling some need, otherwise they wouldn't be tracking him, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the leaders in the party, you're talking about power. Power does not give up, people do not give up power easily, willingly. At least, but we've had a tradition of, if you're defeated in an election, you give up power. We've already seen the tendencies here. So that's at the top. But the people who, you know, are the supporters, you know, there's a lot in there. I mean, a lot to unpack. There's everything from, I feel like I have been, somebody else is getting something I'm not. I feel like I have had bad things happen to me, therefore I need to find someone to blame because it's not me. And immigrants, and you just go down the list of people you can blame. You know, I want to own the libs. I want to have some good feeling for where I am. That's where I think that comes from, and there is a certain satisfaction that comes out of that. My question to you is, how do we reverse this? What interventions do we take to first protect democracy, but also take our citizens tree and somehow bring it back to normalcy as opposed to over the edge?
My Christian faith encourages me to be hopeful, and having spent most of my professional career on the Holocaust and Germany, hope is great and it should motivate us to do the right things. And I still would say that. Say the right things, do the right things, and hope that the good will prevail. However, we've seen where that's not always the case. Factor out of Donald Trump that has been destructive, more than just morals or attitudes or braggadocious talking, or, you know, there's lots of things one could discuss. The appeal that he made to the most base desires of people. Most of us citizens aren't that smart about everything.
Sure.
We may know something of a specialty, we may not. But the number that he did, and we all are responsible for how we respond, but where Donald Trump, I think, holds the trophy, the Oscar in this one, to so diminish the respected anti-intellectualism in the past, and to so diminish those, that means then that nobody can appeal anymore to what's true or right or probable. One just goes by whatever shtick is flying by, and I choose to jump on some program. That I sometimes think that is the worst, his greatest sin. Mm-hmm. Because you and I before could have been talking about a single issue, and we each had our opinions, but we sort of thought there really was something there that would be true.
Facts.
Facts.
Facts, not alternative facts. Facts.
No, this is a fact, and I may see it differently than you, but we both kind of knew that there was a fact. Mm-hmm. We thought we had the right view of it, but even if I'm wrong, there's a fact. That has been totally done away with. Now, when you say what can we do possibly to prevent what's going on, the real demon in the room here is that we can't anymore appeal, because as soon as I suggest to my conversation partners one thing that I think stands the test of time and truth, it's dismissed without even countering it with another truth. It's just that, well, that's your opinion, and you've obviously been listening to this news media or something else. So, and Christian nationalism fits right into that, because go ahead and say what you want about America, but it's just a matter of your opinion, and I have a different opinion, and so where are we going to go with that? So it's a very good question you ask of what can we do that might look towards something more hopeful. I have two postures. One is I'm supposed to be hopeful. I suppose in an eternal big sense, I'm hopeful. God is God, but in history we've come to know that this God who does not micromanage allows things to unfold. And for those in our religious circles who say something like, but everything certainly will end up the way God wants it, I say, no, you can't explain 1.5 million children under the age of 15, Jews who died in the Holocaust. You can't explain to me that there's a God who's in control. There's not. Therefore, it's up to us to make this ship go in the right direction. So that maybe is just to say between now and November, there's a lot at stake. Mm-hmm. And Christian nationalism is not helpful, because whether you're Christian or not, that doesn't assure
let me
anything. Yeah.
Let me just give you my three thoughts on that. The three things I think that we need. I think we need education, mm-hmm. and I think that starts with funding schools and making sure people learn how to think, critically, and that they have real facts to work with, and that when they get out of school, they get to read real newspapers or real journalism that we fund somehow, so that people are covering the truth, and that people vote. that we build that in, that people have us, they're built with that. They know about civics, they've learned about civics, they know that they have a responsibility because they are in charge of this country. They are responsible for what happens, and they need to make a decision.
I think you've put it in perfect words. We've trusted that, and I think it has that. That's probably the only way it will happen, right? But you and I both sitting here know that we have to really work hard at that.
Yeah.
Because now we're even arguing about what can be taught. But maybe we're back to this in education, which I remember from a long time ago, where somebody said, education is not to teach you what to think, but how to think.
Mm-hmm.
And I know enough teachers to know that they work at that. I totally affirm what you just said, but I also am in a relationship with very educated people who have somehow bought, and this goes back to Nazi Germany too. 3 of the most respected theologians, biblically and historical theologians in Germany, Paul Althaus, Gerhard Kittel, and Emanuel Hirsch. 3 names which are represented by a lot more behind them, but those 3 high-level PhD people, while they taught theology and Bible, were card-carrying Nazi members and supported the party.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge why we have to work even harder, because education alone or educational credibility it's not an insurance. It's just the best we have, I think.
So I'll throw one more in there, and that's having conversations. Just like the pro-marriage folks for pro-gay marriage did, they had conversations, and we got to know each other. And you talked about that too.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more conversations that we have, just like we're having here, on one-on-one, more likely are that we're going to be down the right path.
I think you're right that that's the only way. And when I need encouragement from you, and perhaps me to you, is to also gather with those people who do think like us for support, to know that there's others out there. And then we're sent to engage all kinds of other people, because sometimes when I get done engaging those other people, it can be very discouraging. So I think we're talking the only ways it can happen is exactly conversation, education, and those things. This experiment in government, which Lincoln refers to,
yeah.
Can this nation so dedicated and so conceived long endure? We're still testing that, aren't we?
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
No, and so in some way, others have said it, of course, but we are kind of in a civil war, not with gray and blue uniforms yet, or with weapons, much. Who or what is America? And they're 2 quite different ideas about what that is. And Christian nationalism complicates it, because as soon as you put the word Christian on there, then your law-abiding good Christian citizens are saying, well, maybe should I be thinking that way? So these discussions are especially important, I think, for Christian people to know that, or to hear at least enough of a critical word to question that. Mm-hmm. Because it makes sense, sort of. I'm a patriot and I'm a Christian. Well, what about Christian nationalism? Well, as we've discussed, that's a dangerous combination. It has been historically, and it is right now, that we need to stand critical of that, even though, as I say, I'm a flag-loving, American-loving veteran and patriot, but I don't idolize or worship my country.
Yeah. I would say you've pointed out that we need hope, and I think you've also pointed out that we need messengers like you to spread that, because the messenger is important. If I can see myself in the messenger, I'll listen to the messenger.
Hopefully we keep that flame burning. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You can share your thoughts with Mike and John via our email address, democraticvisions@gmail.com. democraticvisions@gmail.com. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel.